This is Steve from Connect and the Minnesota Cannabis College. I'm here with Drew Emmer from Boveda. And one of the things we love about Dabbler Depot is their people. Really laying it on thick.
Yeah, no, Liam,
the culture here, we had Dabbler Depot in the speakeasy last night. So we had a different member of the team, Sam and Kale doing drinks. And it's just, the more we pull on the Dabbler Depot string, like the more illuminated it becomes. Like we're just so enthralled with their brand.
this is Deluxe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful building. The vibe is awesome. You come in, you meet Liam, and he's just as kind and
Did he tell
decent.
you the plants are circulated water from the refrigerators so that they don't put any water. They just recycle it for the plants.
Genius.
And then they have a moss wall above us, which is so cool. You have to come into this location, but they're even going a step further, and they're opening a new store on Friday this week.
Where?
951 Payne Avenue. So east side
of St. Paul. Very different neighborhood.
Yeah. We haven't seen it yet, but we're doing a live stream on Friday.
Do they have a studio over there too? Do you have a whole network of studios now?
I think they do. Yeah. And it's just incredible. So Tanner got the ask, hey, would you want to bring your podcast on video back in October? So Halloween time or so. And then starting in December, they started recording here. And it's just taken our podcast up another level because now we have YouTube, we have clips, we have high quality audio, we have lighting behind us. I mean, it's nice.
Yeah, our Matt Adams does all of our production work at Boveda, and he was raving about the different things that you've done in order to create the exposure that has gotten the following that's really like a wildfire. I mean, it's sort of the source of truth for the Minnesota cannabis community.
Yeah. So I always go back to last summer when we talk about Connect and the Minnesota Cannabis College, and Tanner had advertised on Instagram that he was going to start a grow class through the Minnesota Cannabis College, but the venue was to be announced. And that means one of two things. It's either an illegal party going down and you've got to get a text for the event.
It's a rave. You can enroll, but we're going to tell you right before class begins where to show up.
Or you're still working on figuring out the details. And I reached out right away. I had been thinking about doing a class or having growing focused content, but I don't have any education on that side. And so we realized that we could help each other by me providing a venue and him providing the curriculum and the education. And so we've gone 50-50 on these events since August of last year. And they've been a hoot, maybe even July. I think it was July. It was July 31st. It was the night before legalization. And so we celebrated the last illegal joint outside before, it was like 10 o'clock at the Wilderness. And speaking of the Wilderness, the reason I found the Wilderness was Uptown WeWork.
Right. They
closed. Something about the CEO not wearing shoes walking down the street in Manhattan. And I had a tip from a colleague, and he said, hey, I'm moving over to the Wilderness. It's local. You should check it out. And so I called them knowing I was right on the precipice of starting to have cannabis events again in end of 2022. And so I called them, and I got the office manager, Hannah, and she said, hey, yeah, well, we'd love to have a tour. And I said, are you cannabis friendly? And she said, well, we're not cannabis friendly. And we've just slowly been able to do more and more inside that space. But we like it because they have a copier, a printer, paper clips, tape.
And it's wonderfully accessible. It's in a great location in somewhat of a beleaguered part of town. I mean, that part of town got ripped up pretty bad during the riots, and it's a really great gathering space for people to come together, and it's got that theater and different rooms, and you can have different things going on at the same time. It's been a delight to be down there. So
when you came in that November, right ahead of MJ Biz, and you had the waffle breakfast sandwich from the cafe across the street. I mean, that is my favorite spot in Uptown nowadays for food.
So that's a trippy story. So one of the things that has had a profound impact on my life is my chiropractor. So my chiropractor was one of the first guys in town that was, he was an apprentice to the people that developed applied kinesiology, the extreme, they pull on your arm, muscle testing, asking binary questions, getting your system to tell them in order what it wants to have done in order to be at its most centered and all this. And I'm like, yeah, this is a crock. I thought the guy was a total quack, but he's changed my life. I've been seeing him for 32 years. His office manager, Loveleen, is from India.
Okay.
And her husband, Sanjay, is from India, and he runs the Bryant Lake Cafe.
Yes.
So an absolutely freebie promo. If you're ever at Bryant and Lake,
order the special.
Oh,
whatever it is, it's going to be good.
Anything on the menu is going to be spectacular, and they're just lovely people that put out quality food. It was packed the day we were in there, just this last
Saturday,
week.
Yeah,
it was lovely. The neighborhoods wrapped their arms around them.
Eccentric group of employees, but helpful team members, good quality coffee, fresh pastries. We've done coffee events there that are like morning style events. I think that was the one you were at. And we often will get pastries from Lake and Bryant. And I really...
And an espresso.
Absolutely. Drank that first. Actually didn't have the croissant until Sunday when I found it the next day. I was still hungry, though. Don't get me wrong. I had it. I had to come back on Sunday to clean up everything. But the Uptown area, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but one of the things that
I can refuse to answer.
Yeah, this isn't live. On Saturday we've had the community cleanup event, and I organized that with Turning Leaf Shops, which is a vape shop, CBD shop, just down the street on Lagoon, and Legacy Glassworks, which everybody knows is on Lindale, local glass, great CBD, THC products. We want to evolve that idea more and make it, gamify it a little bit. And so since Saturday, it's now Tuesday, I've talked to Ben, one of the owners of the Wilderness, and they're willing to loan their space to us on a monthly basis. And then we can work with the shops, the stores, for product samples and draw people in by inviting them in with free product after the community cleanup is over. And then we want to have a sign that we can put up while we're doing this so that people that are just in the area, if they catch wind of it, they can come around the back and get their supplies to come pick it up. And I pitched this to Shannon in an email yesterday, so that's how I'm putting you on the spot. I said, let's call it Save Uptown and have Boveda help as a community partner, because not only does Boveda save the terps, but they're also interested in saving Uptown.
Save the town.
Save the town. And we found that people are just interested in doing better. And if you incentivize them with cannabis or community, I think we can turn that into a monthly event where there's no money. It's about coming together in Uptown to make it better.
Well, I'll throw my considerable influence behind that. They're smart enough not to give me a budget because I want to do everything, every trade show. I want to be at every event. I want to be the title sponsor. I want to do everything we can to connect with people and share with them the simple thing that we do. And you've been gracious, and you've had our guys on talking about Boveda. I think people have gotten a pretty good idea of what we're about. We're in the business of helping people have a quality experience with cannabis.
Yeah.
And the other two verticals that we do business in, the cigar market and the musical instrument preservation business. High-end guitars. If you have a guitar case, you put our packs in the guitar case that keeps it at a precise humidity level.
Yeah.
It's important. They're expensive.
The guitars are.
They are.
The thing I like about your product, no offense, is that it's relatively cheap.
Super cheap.
Yeah, I like that. It makes it just it changes the culture of the brand when it can be a high quality brand and a low cost product. That's a fun product to play with as a marketer.
Oh yeah, and we've had people come into the space to compete with us, and their approach is always to say, "Well, we're Boveda at half the price." but then the performance doesn't meet people's expectations, and people come back to us after, if you find something better, by all means, go try it, right?
Sure. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you on that note is, how have you seen the product evolve since you began at Boveda? Like the little changes in performance that I'm not tracking, but the company overall is tracking. Like how does the company explain its evolution when it comes to the performance?
So I'd love to tell you that it's been a really dramatic series of, developments and changes, but the fundamentals about Boveda, it's basically a natural craft paper and food safe inks wrapped around. It's got an extruded membrane on it. It's got salt and water in it.
Yeah.
It's basic.
Yeah.
It's on a vertical machine. It's a remarkable, if you ever go on our website and look at our production facility, it's very basic. What's evolved is our quality control is off the charts. Our fail rates, when I started 8 years ago with Boveda, they weren't significant. They were maybe 1 or 2%, but now they're a fraction of that.
Okay.
So that's improved. And when I started, we didn't have the small ones to go in the 1/8 jars or the 1/8 bags. So that little size one was developed not long, within a year and a half after I started. And the size one really appealed to people because they could put it in the smallest units that were going to retail, and they could deliver quality, and the bud wouldn't be dry.
Yeah.
They wouldn't harsh their throat when they smoked it. I mean, it's important. People have a love affair with the smell and the taste of the cultivars that they buy, and they want to perpetuate that and have that experience every time. Consistency is an incredibly difficult thing to deliver in the cannabis industry.
Sure. Right. Because it's a degrading product.
Well, the flower is. I mean, I was talking to Liam before we started, and we were talking about all these beverages that are in this beautiful store that they have set up right adjacent to the studio, and at 1545 7th Street in St. Paul. And you can also get liquor next door.
Yeah, beer, wine, coffee.
At the Dabbler Depot. I was talking to him about, the consistency in those products is a lot easier to manage because either the brewery or the bottler, if you will, they have really strict SOPs, and they get a formula that matches the SOP, and they thumbs up, and they put the seal on it, and they're done.
Right.
They don't have to worry about the color of the product changing, the texture of the product changing, the flavor of the product changing, which is something that you have to worry about with cannabis. So
yeah,
the flower degrades.
Mm-hmm. Flower degrades.
You killed it when you harvested it.
Stefan said that on the panel.
He was wonderful.
Yes.
Stefan Egan.
Yes. Chief 10 Bears.
Chief 10 Bears. So this guy said something that blew my mind. I learn so much when I go to these events. And Steve had me moderate a panel. It was like herding 3 really brilliant guys. Colin Kelly from Merida Capital, Jeremy Johnston from
Alpine IQ,
and this Stefan Egan, who's an OG genetics guy. That the thing that he said that blew my mind is, we were talking about the evolution of regulation and the tension between the governing bodies and the industry and the culture. And he said, well, we may be dealing with a plant that defies regulation.
Right. Maybe it wasn't meant to be monetized.
I love that observation. It just stops in your tracks, because people will speak flippantly about cannabis as though it's a foregone conclusion. Well, yeah, you go to the dispensary and you get you're this or you're that, and you're off to the races. And it's like, there's so much variation, and there's so much diversity in the plant itself. And we're dealing with beverages and edibles,
right,
today.
Yeah.
When flower truly becomes a thing in Minnesota, then that's going to have a profound impact on that business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's going to be amazing to watch Minnesota figure out how to educate people and promote conscious use of something that could be really good for a lot of people. So
one connection that you may not be aware of between what Stefan does and what you do at Boveda is we had Stefan, we as in the Cannabis College, had Stefan and his partner Kat on, or as a...
I watched it.
In January 15th. And what I want to tell you is the amount of students and consumers and growers that have come up to Tanner and I and shown us how their plants are doing since January, that genetic is amazing. I mean, the flowers on the Ufta OG, as they called it, are beautiful. And it doesn't take much. It's a pretty simple, I mean, obviously it can be complex, but they've done such a good job harnessing the plant and getting it to the right place for the grow that people are looking for, that it should be an award-winning genetic. I mean, they launched that one at our class for that class. And I love seeing these brands and businesses go extra hard to wow the consumers of the Cannabis College or the students of the Cannabis College, because we're at a time when it's really just passion forward. You know, the people that are out here doing it are passionate about it, because there are still a lot of unknowns when it comes to, are you going to get a license? Will this actually be a business model? Can it work? And I like having Boveda a part of our ecosystem because they show another side of the industry, non-plant touching, but very much involved. You mentioned that the size ones or the half-eighth packs were small or were not out when Boveda started. Boveda got into this because large-scale growers were shipping cannabis from California to New York, and they found that this helped maintain dry weight. What more can you tell us about how Boveda got into the cannabis industry? Well, the testimony from an OG that I met shortly after I started with Boveda, I spent the better part of a year in California, Northern California specifically, and I met a guy that said, we thought somebody was stealing from us because, you know, a 53-foot van would go from Northern California to New York. I know this is hard to believe, but this is how things happen in the traditional market. In that van, the trailer that you see driving, the semi-trailer going down the highway, baking in the sun, right, rolling down the highway, 30 hours across the country. Degrading. So they go sell out their inventory when they get to Manhattan or the Bronx or Brooklyn or wherever they're doing that. Oh, at the Cannabis Depot, obviously. And they weigh it out and they sell it, and they go back and look at the books, and they were losing 15 to 18% of the weight. Okay. Wow. Well, if you're losing 15% of that much of a shipment, that's a lot of dough. Yeah. Yeah. Like a lot of money. Right. I mean, that could be your margin. Yeah. So they're going to crack down and watch this more closely, and nobody was stealing from them. They realized that it was the evaporation and transport that was crushing their opportunity. So these packs with higher humidity levels on them were in cigar shops, smoke shops, and unbeknownst to us, there were a lot of packs selling in certain parts of the country. And yeah. Not for music. Not for music and not for cigars. They were ending up in these bigger packs that were going east over the road. Yeah. So once the leaders of our company understood that,
they said, well, we need to really stick our toe in the cannabis industry and find some people that can teach us about how this is done and who's doing it and how we can be useful. Obviously, they saw a big opportunity.
Sure.
But it's not, the biggest obstacle for us doing business with the traditional market is they don't have a tax ID.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They don't have a Dunn's number, Dun and Bradstreet number. Yeah. They don't pay their bills with a ACH or a company check.
Cash.
They bring a duffel bag full of cash, and if you're willing to take cash and deal with the risk of taking cash and then all of the incumbent burden that's on you when you deposit cash, you don't just go sell to the traditional market and have it go smoothly.
I don't know. I mean, there's probably another cigar or music-based company that dabbled with cannabis, but it's not necessarily comfortable to expand the company through a new vertical when you have to deal with those stipulations in order to do business.
Right, when it's all illegal.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's treacherous, but the punchline to this winding story is if you're going to go do business in the traditional market, and 90% of the people in the cannabis industry in Northern California were at one point in the traditional market. They are some of the most straightforward, honest, and honorable people that you'll ever meet, because their word has to be their bond, because if they don't do what they say they're going to do, the ramifications are pretty dramatic.
Yes. How did you first hear about Boveda?
So Cigar Jones, 101 in Minnetonka Boulevard. I smoked cigarettes until my mom died in 2001.
Okay.
She always wanted me to quit smoking, and I had quit everything else. I stopped drinking and doing drugs in 1984, and I really started smoking cigarettes in earnest about that time. And I smoked cigarettes like any good alcoholic for a long time. And then I put my last pack of Marlboro Lights in the grave with Mom.
Okay.
That was symbolic, honoring Mom, and I didn't smoke.
Yeah.
And I had all these wonderful health benefits from not smoking cigarettes. And then my brother smoked cigars.
Okay.
We were hunting out in North Dakota, and he was having a cigar, and I had a cigar, and I fell in love with cigars. And I'd have them once in a while. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't want to get back into the nicotine addiction thing where I'm always going out in 30 below to smoke a dart, on a break at work.
Pouring rain, just
I got to have my fix. But I fell in love with cigars. I'm buying cigars one or two at a time from Cigar Jones. One particular day I went in, I probably bought 10 sticks.
Okay.
And the guy put a Boveda pack in my bag, my exit bag. And I said, "What's this?" And he said, he said the magic words. The heavens opened up and I heard the choir of angels sing when he said, "You'll never recharge your humidor again." And I was like, whoa, because I messed around with my humidor all the time because you have to pour distilled water into this element and then it leaks and it gets all over. It's just a mess. So this is, says it right on the pack. I used to say it on the pack. No mess, no worry, enjoy. I mean, it's just super easy. So the guy tells me this pack will change your life with the way you take care of your humidor. And he also adds, if you want to meet the guys, their office right downstairs. So I didn't know there was a basement to this cigar store. And it was under a Holiday Station store. It's like a little strip mall.
Yes.
And you go into this dungeon. There's no windows, but it was really nicely decorated. They had done a nice job of setting up their headquarters there. They'd been there for a number of years at that point. They used to do business out of the living room of the founder. And when they graduated from that, they moved to Cigar Jones in the basement. And I walked down and I met Sean Knutson, and we struck up a conversation. And a couple weeks later, we got together for a cigar. And I said to him and his guys what I say to just about anybody. And I think this is zeroing in on subjects that we had discussed possibly talking about today.
Yeah.
I said, if it ever occurs to you that there's something that I could do to be helpful, call me. What can I do to help you?
Yeah.
And a couple weeks later, one of his guys, his biz dev guy, Charlie, called me, and he wanted me to come over and have a cigar and a sandwich and talk about ways to enhance and further develop the way they do business in the cannabis industry.
Oh, what year was this?
This was 8 years ago. So
I think Boveda's been in the cannabis industry about 12 years.
no, it's more than that.
Okay.
Company's 27 years old. About 5 years in, they got into the music business, and it was probably another 5 years. Their first real experience with the cannabis industry is they found a guy that was an OG dealer out in California that had a garage on the beach type of thing, and they shipped him on consignment a garage full of Bovedas, and he shared them with all his buddies.
Okay.
And that's how we got launched in California. So, but that's how I met Boveda, and I was an independent consultant for them for 6 or 8 months, and then they wanted all my attention, and
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
how that happened.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Drew Emmer from Boveda Inc. And we're back. So I want to keep going with you on the Boveda story. And I also want to understand how you balance being around cannabis while also being sober. And I know cigars help with the socialization aspect of it outside, but what are some other ways, not other ways, but you do a really good job of connecting with people. And how do you manage to connect with people while also feeling confident enough or comfortable enough to not always consume when you're with these people?
It's a great question. I think it helps if you're a lover of weed.
And you are.
I loved weed. I smoked an enormous amount, but
Yeah.
take it with a grain of salt. The stuff we were smoking back in 1984 when I stopped smoking was max maybe 10% THC. But we had some of the best bud in town.
Right.
We were fortunate. We had friends in Hawaii that were helping us find their product, and I had a love affair with cannabis. I smoked from the time I got up throughout the day, and it didn't interfere with my work or my, I shouldn't say that. It interfered a little bit with school, but it
was part of your lifestyle.
It was very much a part of my lifestyle, and it was very much a part of the socialization that I participated in as a young man, 18, 19, 20 years old.
I can relate to that.
I spend a lot of time working on my insides. I'm a regular member of a fellowship that will remain nameless.
Sure.
Anonymous, if you will. And I work with guys that are trying to get clean and trying to stay clean and develop a spiritual experience that's capable of giving them everything that their ism was providing. It's really, it's becoming a little daunting because Orthodox members of the fellowship that I hang out in that will remain nameless,
Yeah.
there's a bias. There's a natural inclination to think, well, any consumption of cannabis is bad. Well,
I want to chime in because we're facing this as a industry or a society with non-alcoholic. Does non-alcoholic also include 5 milligrams of cannabis?
Yeah. So my answer, which you can use with full license and no royalties, alcohol is alcohol. Cannabis is cannabis.
Okay.
Don't lump them into the same milieu. There's more to cannabis than meets the eye. I never looked at alcohol as medicine.
Sure.
Although in retrospect, there were probably a number of things in my life that I was treating with my enthusiastic consumption of alcohol and everything else that I was consuming. Mm-hmm. But I was also playing sports, and I was also involved in school, and I was also an intern at IBM, and I was busy. I had things going on. I was going places.
Yeah, sure were.
And I had no intention of staying stopped when I got sober. When I got sober, all I wanted to do was get the heat off. I had money problems. I had family that was hip to the money problems, and I had brothers that were very kind in helping me get out of the jam that I was in with the guy that I was buying the other white substance from, which will also remain nameless. Yep. And I just wanted to get the heat off. I had no intention of staying.
Sure, right.
So let's just find a way to drink and use responsibly, and I'll be on my way.
Oh,
Thank
sure.
you very much.
Sure, I'm sure. That sounds great.
So
have it your way.
What happened is I participate with this group. I do the process that they suggest I do, and I have undeniable results. And my life is better.
Yeah.
And I feel great. And I'm able to do a lot of things that I wasn't able to do. And I got hooked on that.
Yeah. And your positive energy is something that stands out.
So it helps if you have a preconceived belief that cannabis is good. Now, can cannabis be bad? Yeah, nobody's so naive as to say that I like to tell people if 15% or 13% of the population is predisposed to alcohol the way I am, my guess is it's probably 10% of the population that's predisposed cannabis-wise to where it might be something that they have to be really vigilant about and conscious of the way they engage with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to just get your take on this. It's not an easy one per se, but as I spend more time in this industry, I come across more inherent biases or stigmatizations that are just baked into our society. And one that I struggle with is drugs and alcohol. And alcohol gets this special carve out in our society where it's allowed to be advertised on TV. It's allowed to be glorified in so many different ways in our society, especially to young people. And I just feel like it's not fair. And I'm not saying, Drew, life's not fair, but I kind of am, because drugs and alcohol removes alcohol from drugs. And I push back saying alcohol is a drug.
Well, alcohol is a drug, but alcohol is a very concise description of a category. When you say drugs, I could be talking about heroin, I could be talking about speed, Adderall, or methamphetamine in a pill.
Yeah.
That's what Adderall is.
Yes.
So you could go through, you have this sort of long and winding road around the drug label. The drug label isn't particularly fair to cannabis.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Because cannabis also falls under natural remedy. Cannabis falls under plant medicine.
Yes.
And when when you say it's not fair, well, of course it's not fair, because if you were to make it fair, you would be upsetting the apple cart, because there's very entrenched interests that own the booze companies, and the government's in cahoots with them because of all the tax money that the government gets
from alcohol.
Cannabis is going to start having more cachet with politicians when it starts to have that kind of tax revenue impact. And it's not to say that the states and local governments haven't gone out of their way to get their piece in this perennially nascent business. I mean, we're a new business every year. We've been saying cannabis is a nascent business since I started, and they were saying it was new 15, 20, 25 years ago.
Sure.
It's still ground floor opportunity, largely because the interests haven't figured out how to dominate it, how to monopolize it, how to patent it, how to exclusivize it to their liking. I mean, if I'm a pharmaceutical person, you listen to a lot of people rail against cannabis on the news. One particular channel, Laura Ingraham, likes to go off regularly about plant medicine, either ethnogens, the mushrooms, the psilocybin, or the cannabis.
Uh-huh.
And she's really cynical about it, and she talks down to people like they're dopers, and it's really rather disgusting for somebody that I used to have a tremendous amount of respect for.
Sure.
But in the process, what she does is she belies the reality that her sponsors are the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
So if you're, Rockefeller, when he discovered that he could make drugs out of petroleum, his first target was to take down the natural products business, natural remedies,
right.
of which there were many.
Right.
I don't know if you follow Barbara O'Neill at all. I've got this gal on, wherever the memes come from, wherever the videos come from. I don't know if it's TikTok. I don't want it to be TikTok because I don't want China in my stuff. But whatever those are and wherever they're coming from, I see a lot of them on my phone. And there's Barbara O'Neill, this old Australian lady, talking about turmeric and garlic and basil and what it can do for your plaque and your veins and this and that. And they've largely silenced her.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So you got to get real and understand that there's entrenched power and profit that's at risk if this goes back to, I'm getting way off your question, but
no, I'm with you.
The fundamental ethic behind cannabis when it went legal in California, Dennis Perone was trying to get relief to AIDS patients. This was a really good thing. He was trying to help people that were in a lot of pain and having a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And compassionate care was a foundational brick of the beginning of the California cannabis culture. And as long as you have compassionate care, where people that have a medical need have a preference in getting medicine, or the offshoot of compassionate care is the ability to grow at home.
Yes.
So every state that's in every country so far, with a couple exceptions, has had a home grow program. They've had a compassionate program or a medical program that took place first, and then the adult use or recreational market came later. So the piece about this that's so important to remember is if you don't have compassionate care or you don't have home grow, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say your state is doomed, because this goes back to Stefan's comment about the unregulatable plant. She has ethics. And if you violate her ethics, if you go against the grain of what she stands for, you're going to get hurt. And their consequences are going to come. If you over commercialize this, or if you take the compassionate care and the personal relationship that people get to have. I don't care if you smoke pot. I don't care if you drink beverages. Grow a plant. Take the time to grow a plant and watch a couple of videos and figure out how to do it and have a relationship with the plant and feed it and water it and shape it and watch her go from veg state to flower state and smell her and experience that plant, whether you ingest it or not. I don't care.
It's special.
You walk into, if you walk into is it called the conservatory over at Como Park?
Right, yeah.
You walk into that room with all those plants in the middle of winter. Well, how do you feel?
You feel alive.
It changes you. You walk into a grow facility, or you stick your head into somebody's little tent that they got out in their garage with their LED light and their, 4 plants or whatever they're doing, and you take a whiff of that plant in flower, and it stops you in your tracks.
Right.
It's life-changing. It's wholesome. And when you get down to it, everything they taught me at these shows, I could do a lot of trade shows for Boveda, and I'd be around all these CBD people, and they'd be telling me about the CBD and the endocannabinoid system, and these are all things that are a part of us. There's tons of cannabinoids in the world.
Yeah. Cannabis
is one category of source of cannabinoids that we can talk about very specifically, but there's cannabinoids and terpenes and flavors and things that make you feel good in all sorts of things that we grow in our gardens, all sorts of things that we consume. There's a lot more to this. It's almost like you're rejecting a part of yourself if you have contempt prior to investigation and you don't give the plant a chance. It may not be right for you.
Sure.
But there's no reason why you should deprive somebody else of their opportunity to discover for themselves what it might be able to do for them. Go talk to people that deal with autism, or people that deal with seizures, people that deal with epilepsy, people that have my eyes were opened when I went to a show and I ran into a guy, Roger Martin, God bless his soul. Wonderful guy, had a outfit called Grow for Vets. He was a opiate addict that got clean and surprised himself because he was very biased against cannabis. But cannabis flower helped him get off of opiates. And then his mission in life for the rest of his life was to help vets get off of opiates with cannabis. And Boveda supported him with all the packs we could possibly give him, because they got all sorts of donations of flower, and they shared them with vets all over the state of California. And in the process of getting to know him, I got to listen to the story. And you listen to somebody's testimony when they say, this is the cocktail that the Veterans Administration prescribed to me that I was taking, and this is the kind of shape that I was in. And then fast forward to, this is when I started using cannabis, and whether they continued for the rest of their lives or whether it was just a situational thing where they used cannabis for a particular period of time, it changed them. And you hear that testimony.
Yeah.
And you just can't deny, and this goes back to our whole sales pitch for Boveda. We sell these packs, and my closing when I talk to somebody is, don't take the charming salesperson's word for it. Just try it. Put it in your process. Check it out. Do a blind taste test. Flower stored with, flower stored without. If you don't have a relationship with flower, put one of these in your brown sugar at home.
It works.
See if you're not just thrilled that your brown sugar doesn't harden up like a rock in September. And when you know how it is, you just take the bag out, you got to use it, and it's like you got to chip away a piece of brown sugar.
I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that anymore. I'm a Boveda convert. But I want to talk about Minnesota a little bit, because if we look at the last 10 years, Minnesota has a complicated relationship with medical cannabis. I got into this industry in 2019 through hemp. And back then, hemp didn't get you high, and the medical program was really nowhere to be seen. It was extremely difficult to get into. It was extremely expensive to purchase.
Two producers, 2 licenses.
And yeah, limited licenses, 2 licenses.
4,000 or 5,000 card holders.
Yeah.
For a long time.
We had Colin on about 2 days after Canna Connect 4, and he told us a little bit about the regulation that he was facing as the operator there, and like how challenging it was because they weren't allowed to run out of product. That was one of the rules. If they ran out of product, they could get their license pulled. And so it made it inherently risky to add more SKUs. But also those products had to be so refined. We didn't get flower until 2 years ago, less than that. And so it's to juxtapose what Minnesota presented for the majority of this program to how you interpreted medical cannabis through the lens of California and the compassionate care that's available. We have this unique market here where 5 milligram, 10 milligram beverages are just flying off the shelves, and yet we're just getting closer to a respectable medical program, and we still only have 2 operators, a duopoly of sorts. So how do you look at this market, not just because it's a hometown bias, but how do you look at what Minnesota is doing in cannabis compared to what you see across North America?
2 distinct personalities will emerge when you're talking about cannabis. There are regulators and people in that side of the business whose fundamental job description is public safety.
Okay.
And then there are people that have a relationship with the plant.
Mm-hmm.
Something that Canna Connect could do and the Minnesota Cannabis College could do is really focus on going on a journey with regulators to try to soften them up and give them some sense of passion for the plant. Because, like, take a look at Canada, for example. Canada is a great example for Minnesota to look at because Minnesotans are a lot like Canadians in a lot of respects.
Yeah, I went to a comedy show last year, and the comedian just called us like the South of Canada.
Actually, Minnesota is going to be annexed into Canada. They're giving up Saskatchewan, the only province where you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is if you're a regulator, you have one charge, public safety. Public safety, I like to conflate quality with safety because I think quality and proper SOPs for production enhance safety. I lump them together, but then again, I'm in the quality business.
Right.
And there's an aspect of this that's part of the safety business too, but realistically, I'm really in the quality business. Regulators are in the safety business. As long as regulators are in the safety business, they're not, and they have constituents that are barking in the other ear that are saying, oh no, we shouldn't have more drugs. And we shouldn't have, there are interests that are lobbying to not have anybody get exposed. We don't need any more consumers, which is the farthest thing from the truth.
Right.
We need to find ways to connect with the soccer mom and the geriatric patient and the, people, staffs at nursing homes, people that have various cocktails of pharmaceuticals that they're taking that they might be able to have better quality of life.
Sure.
If they were to experience cannabis in some way.
I like that, Drew. I think the biggest opportunity is those areas, yeah. And not to dig into event opportunities, but I think the over 60 crowd there's a huge opportunity to better educate them on what are effective products, what are quality products that aren't costing you an arm and a leg, so to say.
Well, there's another caveat to this that's important to shed some light on. Politically, it's not a Democrat Republican thing or a liberal conservative thing. It's a all of us thing. And there's a lot of people. If you go to California, you go up on the hill in California in the Emerald Triangle and you talk to these growers, 90% of them are Republicans.
Yeah.
Because they're rugged individualists out in the forest trying to support their family by doing this thing they've been doing for so many years. And they're struggling to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And we need everybody across the spectrum to open their minds about what's possible and to have some respect for views that are not in line with their own.
Right.
Go out of your way to talk to somebody that drives you crazy. Go out of your way to talk to somebody that doesn't believe the way you believe or value what you value, and understand that they have as much of a right to be here as you do, mm-hmm. and find a way to develop some common ground. I think
to bring it back to the Minnesota market, we are seeing adoption through can, and that container of cannabis is more socially acceptable because we're used to 12-ounce cans for soda and for beer and 16-ounce cans for beer or pints. So I think in some ways Minnesota is leading adoption with this low-dose hemp-derived market.
Well, it's doing what it can.
It's doing what it can.
Sure. That was a double, whatever you call it. So this is troubling to me because if I drink a cannabis beverage, it's metabolized through my liver. I have a different experience than if I ingest a flower product or a vape product through my lungs.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to someone at the last event and I kind of freaked her out because it's always weird when some old guy talks to you about suppositories. Suppositories were... I got to change this sentence before it comes out of my mouth. Suppositories were a primary way of dosing patients in the beginning in California.
Okay.
Because up the hoo is an absolute shortcut to the bloodstream. It's not deleterious to your lung tissue. It's a very different, and it's very different than going through your liver. Because your liver does things.
Yeah.
It does a lot of things.
Sure.
So
right. I see.
By getting this THC and other cannabinoids into the system through the nether regions,
right?
It was it's another way of dosing. I got a friend in Canada. She's got a company that's just on fire. She's going all over the world lecturing about women dealing with pain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she's got products that they're primarily administered.
So they're suppositories. Sure. Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to talk about.
I mean,
as I start shifting.
I hear about this. I don't typically do that, but
you're talking about Minnesota. We're doing what we can in the can, mm-hmm. but it's so limited. I mean, let's be real. How do you legalize a state without having retail, distribution, and cultivation figured out?
And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back and finish up our interview with Drew Emmer from Boveda.
So how's the new generation going to do that?
I think the cannabinoids play a big role in further understanding. Like the first time I saw CBD flower, I didn't quite understand it. And so having that option, the more data that we have on these products, the less intimidating they might be. The more clear packaging and labeling that we have to understand what we're taking takes some of the risk out of buying it from the guy up the street or the guy on Marshall that you know. But, and here's why I can say that. Summer of 2020, I quit my job. It was May, end of May, the week of George Floyd riots. I said, my job is not set up for remote work. I'm just floundering. I'm not doing anything meaningful. I don't know where my career is going. I'm going to quit my job. And I got on a food truck that summer and I worked with Kamal Mohammed, who's a up-and-coming chef now in the Twin Cities. And he had just moved back from California and launched this concept with his brother and his family. And it was the hottest food truck of the summer. But I interacted with Gen Z. And I worked there for 3 years. So I developed different friendships and work relationships with this younger generation. And occasionally after work, we would smoke. And I would bring CBG flower. I would bring CBD flower. I would bring blends of CBG, CBD, and THC. And I would talk to my friend Marshall, who was like a freshman in college or about to go into college. And I was like, 10 years ago, I was you, and I didn't have these options. And so a large part of where I come from through the hemp industry is better understanding cannabinoids and realizing that cannabinoids can be charted like a periodic table. There's about 106, 107 that we know about. And I had a guy in my LinkedIn messages today. He sent me a photo of my beverage that he had bought at a liquor store. And he was like, well, I know CBD and THC, but can you tell me a little bit about CBG and CBC? And I was like, yeah, well, CBG is the mother cannabinoid. All cannabinoids start as CBG before they convert to what their final form is. When it paired with CBD, it has even better effects. It's also really good for brain inflammation, memory. It's good for addiction properties and lowering that need for substance. And CBC is a little bit new for me. I don't know as much about it. I don't think everyone knows as much, but it's uplifting. It's good for energy. I said, I don't know a ton, but that's what I know. And I think the cannabinoid soup and being able to take products that don't get you high, but that are in the cannabis family are a new thing versus when I was in school smoking pot and when you were in school smoking pot. And so I also want CBD to be seen more as a medicine or as a vitamin or as a supplement so that kids aren't getting Adderall prescriptions and then selling Adderall and using it as a currency because we know that happens.
Great education when exposed to a young man that got on a methadone program and just understanding after observing him in our household for months on this methadone program, going to University Avenue over in St. Paul to get his daily dose until you reached a certain level of trust where you could have a week's supply on hand or what have you. And all the businesses that were built around that, the non-emergency medical transportation, where there's a service that comes and picks you up to take you there, and then there's the food shelf, and you go to the food shelf and you walk out the door, and there's somebody standing out at the curb to take the bags from you and give you the cash for the food, the resellers market, the psychiatrist that they take you to get the meds, come out with your meds. There's a resale market for that. This is how systems evolve around programs.
Right. The black market. The underground, the offshoot that they're not accounting for, that 18% that disappears. It's natural. I think to bring it back to the plant provides, and it can engulf us, and it's incredibly useful when used correctly, but you have to learn along the way. I mean, it took me a long time to not overuse cannabis. And occasionally there are times when I do. It's usually with friends, which is why I asked that question of how do you manage to stay sober when you're exposed to so much opportunity to use. But the CBG has played a big role in helping me battle just bouts of overuse or abuse, I would say. And so
I add something to when you asked me about staying sober and being in the middle of the cannabis industry. So the short answer, I'd be like Scotty Scheffler from the Masters this weekend. The short answer is God takes care of it for me.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
The longer answer is we all have a responsibility to figure out our bodies and figure out our lives. Nobody else is going to do it for you. You got certain foods that get along with you. You got certain foods that don't. You got certain behavior that works for you. You get certain behavior that doesn't. If you're drinking or using for oblivion, welcome to the club. Happy to be a resource to help you if you ever want to change that. But most people, the vast majority of people, are not negatively impacted by experimenting with or consuming cannabis. The vast majority of people are not negatively affected by drinking alcohol either, because they have a sense of themselves and they know when to stop or they know when to moderate, and they're good.
Yeah.
Don't want to, I'm more of a libertarian than anything. I don't want to take anybody's opportunities away. I just love to get people to stop taking other people's opportunities away. Decide for yourself. If you don't want to be someone that enjoys cannabis, if you're going to go to the Bridge Club and you're going to criticize Marge because Marge tells you that she took a 10 milligram gummy before she went to bed on Thursday, well, then maybe you should get out of the Bridge Club.
Yeah.
How about letting Marge do whatever the hell she wants to do?
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
She's probably 80.
Yeah.
And she's a hell of a bridge player.
Yeah.
You'd never know that she was on the drugs.
It's just not, like you said at the onset when I asked you about drugs and alcohol. Cannabis is more plant medicine than drug. And we have these terms and these words, then they have a certain connotation to them. And if used responsibly, if grown at home, if understood, if you're educated around it, cannabis is not something that should be feared. It's something that can be used as a positive. We have to continue with education. We have to continue with destigmatization.
Easy for you to say.
And it takes time, but luckily now, fortunately now, we have an adult use market. And, when you and I were born, hemp clothing was not even allowed to be imported into the United States. So
people used to pay their taxes with hemp.
Yes.
I mean, there's a whole other show to talk about the illegalization of cannabis. That is such an interesting sociological adventure to understand why we prohibited cannabis in the first place.
Yeah, I think I would love to go down that.
That's a whole another
on another episode.
Yeah, but and you owe it to yourself to understand why the laws were made that were made, and what the impacts were, and the way it's affected neighborhoods, and the reason why it plays into the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion part of the Minnesota law in terms of helping communities that were most adversely affected. It's right along the lines of talking about how the Rondo neighborhood got run over by I-94 when that came through. So
right.
There's a lot to learn. You owe it to yourself to get smart and understand and take a couple teaspoons of compassion with all of your knowledge so that you can keep your powder dry and not blow people up when they say stupid things, because we live in a society with social media now where everybody's criticizing everybody at the drop of a hat. And it's getting kind of old.
Yeah.
It's really getting old. It's like the next evolution of that, where we go back to some basics of decency and kindness and patience and restraint.
Sure.
Restraint's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Drew, we'd love to have you back in the future.
Is it over already?
I think we're going to wrap up. It's Tanner's birthday.
Tanner's birthday. Everybody at home, we want you to join us now in singing.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tanner. Happy birthday to you.
Thanks, guys. Well, I've never been able to legally consume cannabis on my birthday until this year. So it's a big one.
Congrats. Drew, thank you so much for being on the show.
Check us out at bovedainc.com. Grab a Sea Vault, get some packs, keep your weed fresh. Nobody likes dry weed.
No, nobody likes dry weed. And come see us on May 5th. We'll be doing one more class with Boveda at the Wilderness before the semester's over. We're doing the Bubble Hash Bonanza.
The Bubble Hash Bonanza. Sounds fun.
And you're invited.
I'll show up.
Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week on the Northern Lights Podcast.